I finally have a real life Jupiter 8 here. I've been trying to get my hands on one for years now, and it feels like I know it inside out already, because I've got a Jupiter 6 and the layout on the panel is very similar to the Jupiter 8, as is the Super Jupiter with the retroactive controller, as is things like the Udo Super 6 and the Udo Super 8. But probably like most of you, I got to grips with the Jupiter 8 originally through using soft synths. A few years ago, I did a shootout between the Arturia, Diva and the Roland Cloud, and since then we've seen the arrival of Acoustica Audio's TH8 and the TAL versions as well. So the Jupiter 8 is beyond popular, but the prices of used ones are coming down slightly. They were at a peak of around £30,000 a few years ago. Now you can get a decent one for about £20,000 or less if you're lucky. I'm looking at Reverb here. Here's one for £26,000. 19,000, so that'd be, if you got it into the UK, add another 20% or whatever on top of that. So that'd be about £24,000 until it's reduced from 25 or 26,000. 19,000 from Japan. So again, in the UK, that still cost you about 24, 25. Almost 23 in France, almost 23 in the States. Thought that was one for 2,800 then for a second. That would have been a bit of a bargain. But anyway, I have found myself being the temporary custodian of this big old analog beast. And it does really feel old, actually. It weighs an absolute ton. And if you touch this heatsink at the back, that's uncomfortable to touch for any amount of time. But it does feel like a bit of a homecoming. It does feel really familiar, and it feels like an old friend, even though I've never had one before. But something that's really interested me for a while, and almost part of the reason I've got the Jupiter 8 here, is to test it out against the Jupiter 8 on the Roland Cloud that you get in the System-8. The System-8 is a wonderful bit of kit. It comes with the Jupiter 8, the Juno 106 and the JX3P in there, I think, but there's lots of other things in the Roland Cloud that you can throw into it in there, so what they call the plug-out technology. Here's the soft synth version of it, and if we click up on the right hand side, you can have the System-8 panel layout as well. So this is the same knobs and sliders as you get on the System-8. So that matches this. And if you've not seen a System-8 before, it's got its own System-8 synth, but on top of that you've got the plug out. So this one is the Jupiter 8, I think this one's a 106, and in this we've got the Jupiter 4. But if you look, if the lights show these lovely tasteful green LEDs, it changes what's accessible depending on what plug out you're on. So on the System-8, everything that's lit up in green is available on here. So if I wiggle one of these, for example, this mixer, that should be wiggling on the Jupiter 8. It's got some really clever little bits in here as well. So these variations are changing the position of this little modulation knob up here. If we go into the Jupiter 8 layout, it's this little switch here. So as I tweak these, we get different options on the envelope modulation, which is this, as I say, it's this switch here. So it's a really clever little design. Another one on this is the envelope choice for the filter. So you can see that flicking up and down over here. So yeah, inside the System-8, you've got the ACB, the analog circuit behavior version of the Jupiter 8, and that's Roland's top-end emulation. It emulates the actual circuits, not just creates the sounds. So the System-8 is generally different technology than the Xenology stuff, although some Xenology things like the Phantom can have things like the 101, and I think you can get the Jupiter 8 for it as well now. But anyway, let's just dive in and show you what we've got here. Before I get into things, I started prepping for this by creating a few similar patches. They're trying to match the envelopes, the resonance, the filter and the rest of it, and there's an LFO in there on the pitch, there's an LFO and some PWM. Putting all that together and still sounding very similar is pretty cool. Go to the next one. It's a nice pad. If you look at those frequency analysis, we're pretty much bang on there, aren't we? Let's try another. Again, very close. Maybe a little bit more detune on that than I needed. It does depend on where we are in the tuning cycle of the JP08 on what you do with the System-8, obviously, because this drifts out of tune slightly. So when you're programming a patch, and you might be programming it when it's drifted out a bit, it sounds identical, then you retune it and it doesn't sound exactly the same, but you get the idea. Let's just dig into that patch a little bit more, shall we? So we'll go to oscillator 1 on its own. Oscillator 2 on its own is a little bit out of tune. And if you play the two of them together, you can hear the beat in there. I've tried to get that the same. And that's when you play a chord, the chorusy effect of having the two of them beating at different rates on each keys is the same on both synths, because it can drastically change the character of the tone. Let's do that over here again then. Let's maybe turn that into a pulse with some PWM on it. Let's try that over here. Put it onto a pulse. Add some PWM. Match these LFOs. I'm just trying to show really that I'm not spending too long matching these things, it just sort of happens. So then bring in the first oscillator again. So still pretty close. Let's knock oscillator 2 up an octave. So it'll come to there and then a little bit out of tune there. Where's the fine tune? And then try some cross mod. So I know I'm going into mental territory there, but I'm trying to show that as you match things, it just sort of matches. And if it didn't sound like JP08, that would sound nothing like it whatsoever, because when you're doing cross mod, everything's got to match. And it's almost exactly the same. It's getting a bit different up there. That's probably got a lot to do with the tuning of the JP08 being slightly out as you go up and down the keyboard, possibly needs a calibration, but even so, it's got exactly the same character, hasn't it? Yeah, so that's what we've been doing, playing around, matching patches, being really impressed by the System-8. But let's take a listen to some of the oscillators and show you exactly how it behaves now, shall we? The VCOs on the JP08 are a little bit strange in that they're not both the same. We've got a triangle and a square on VCO1, whereas we've got a sine and noise on VCO2. They've both got a sawtooth and a pulse. Starting off with a sawtooth, the System-8 has all of them on each of the oscillators. There's some minor differences in the top end there. You can see the slight differences in the slope, but it's not really anything you can really pull out when you're listening to it. If you look at that frequency analysis, you can see these little spikes next to the main frequencies. I've no idea what they are, but they're both doing it. I had thought when I started doing this, it was some sort of weird aliasing from the System-8, but it's, you know, the JP08's doing it as well, unless it's my interface, but I don't think so. It depends how you turn your head when you're listening to these things, how different they sound to each other. But I think they're pretty close, aren't they? Let's try the square. And then let's add some PWM. When I'm using the square on the JP08, the pulse width doesn't do anything. But using the pulse, so they're quite similar as well. Nothing's going through zero, going really small. And it sounds like the pulse width is stepping. I'm not sure if that's just because the sliders are a bit sticky or if it's got anything to do with the fact that this is the earlier version of the JP08 and that's got the 12-bit converter in there rather than the 14-bit you got on the later versions. The 14-bit really just makes it save things quick. It's a slightly faster processor apparently, but maybe it makes things like the digitization of the parameters, maybe it makes it a little bit more smooth. On the System-8, it's gloriously smooth. Anyway, let's move over to, what haven't we done yet? Let's move over to the triangle. There's a little bit of buzziness in both of them, isn't there? Minor differences in tone, and then let's go to the sine. I think perhaps the JP08's a bit buzzier. Again, I think they're pretty damn close, but no matter how close they are, they don't really work well if the tuning and stuff like that isn't the same or similar at least. So coming back to the sawtooth on this, and then playing an octave. You can hear there's some movement in that. And that'll be the oscillators not quite being perfectly in tune, otherwise you wouldn't be getting that movement in that waveform. But coming over to the System-8, it's perfectly in tune. So we've got this circuit mod knob here. And that gives us that drift between them. So that's only on about 20 out of 127. Maybe just a bit less needed. Well, that gives us that beautiful sort of old vintage synth slop, isn't it, really? Which may sound vaguely familiar to some of you. But we're getting that real nice little bit of movement in there, aren't we? And that's just a single oscillator on each, but it gives you that sort of lovely chorusy effect. If we had another oscillator, we go into beautiful lush pad territory. So let's try it up here. So oscillator-wise, I think we're pretty close. Let's try some sync. I have set them up already. So the sync sounds the same. Let's make that a bit longer. Try that over here. So we've definitely got the same tonality in there, haven't we? But what we do have on the JP08 is a little bit more range. We look here, I've got this on just about 6 or 7. Let's make this a bit slower. Or faster, I mean, so that's going up into crackly territory, isn't it? Over here. We can't, that's as much range as I can get. So let's take a look now at the filters. Starting off with the 24 dB. And they sound very similar, don't they? If not identical. If you look at the graphs being really picky, there's a slight difference in the roll-off on the top end. I think the System-8's a tiny bit brighter. Yeah, you can definitely see it and maybe hear it a bit there. Very subtle though. And I'm being super picky here because it is the JP08 and everybody wants to have a JP08 for, you know, £800 or wherever you can get one of these used for. So, you know, just to put any arguments to bed, really. Let's add some resonance. A bit more, maybe. You get a lot more control over the cutoff frequency on the System-8. It's super, super smooth, whereas on the JP08, it's really steppy. But it's easier to match something the JP08 does with the System-8 than the other way around. So this is 10 minutes late after trying to get that right on. And when you get it right on, it's bang on. But it isn't easy to do that, actually. It did take me a few minutes to get there. And that's because I am being super, super picky because it is the JP08 and everyone wants to know if it's identical. But just getting this cutoff identical on both of them is really hard. So let's try a chord. And let's knock the resonance down a bit. You see there where they sound a bit different. That's not because they're different. That's because it's just so hard to get those cutoffs bang on. That's better. I'm trying it on a 12 dB. I'd go as far as to say they're the same again. Not identical, but close enough to be the same, really. I imagine, as I say quite a lot, you get the same sort of differences when they're this slight between two JP08s. But let's chuck some resonance in there now. We're getting more of a resonant peak on the JP08. But not a massive amount, and above the cutoff they drop off in a similar way. So again, just like with the 24 dB, the 12 dB is super close to the JP08. It's not identical to mine, but you know, I won't bother repeating myself, but that really does have the same character. I'm really, really impressed by the System-8. Here's an interesting little thing I noticed while playing this. The 24 dB filter drops off at the cutoff quite dramatically. So when we go up the keyboard, we lose pretty much everything. Try that over here. It's doing exactly the same. I don't know if lots of other keyboards do that. I've not actually tried. Sounds the same, doesn't it? It's even got the same little vibrations in there, hasn't it? Wow. After trying this on so many synths over the past few years, you really get a feel for when something does sound or feel the same or has the same character. And this 100%, the System-8 100% has got the same character as the filter in the JP08. Let's just try a bit of envelope modulation and see if we get the same amount of modulation. So they are pretty similar. I'm setting the cutoff so it's nice and high there and dropping as low as it'll go. But an odd one with the System-8, do it slower and bring the cutoff higher. It always starts sort of dipped at about the 20 kilohertz, like it doesn't really want to go higher than the 20 kilohertz. Whereas this, it's a very minor point, just something I noticed, but importantly, you can still get those sort of nice squelchy bass lines from it. Nice and snappy as well. And just for thoroughness, here are the envelopes with the maximum attack, decay and release. And they've got the same shape, but the JP08 is fractionally longer. And while we're looking at modulation, I thought I'd just take a quick look at the PWM again. That's modulating with the filter envelope. Same on the JP08, and we just get a fraction more modulation. Doesn't quite go as thin on the System-8 on this one. Well, compared to this JP08 at least. And then let's put this onto LFO. So the same maximum amount of modulation. Just ever so slightly less on the System-8. Not that I ever normally take it that high anyway, normally around there. Which, if I do this on here, which is why I've never really noticed it over the past couple of weeks, because making patches I tend not to go all the way to the edge. And as it doesn't go through zero, it's not like you can get those delay effects you can get with some, where you get like a faux delay type sound. And quickly looking at the speed of the LFO, the JP08 is fractionally faster than it is on the System-8. And the lowest rate of the Jupiter 8 is lower than the lowest rate of the System-8 as well. So overall, the LFO on the Jupiter 8 has got more range, slightly more range than it does on the System-8. I think I've looked at just about everything I wanted to look at there. I've not gone into massive amount of detail there with the LFOs, for example, and the amount of modulation or the speed of the LFOs. I really just wanted to know, has the System-8 got the same character as the Jupiter 8? And I think I can definitely say, yes, it has. Is it identical to my Jupiter 8? Well, for all intents and purposes, I've got to say, pretty much. I know you'll hear slight differences and people will definitely pick up on things that are different between them, things like the modulation amounts maybe and the sync and stuff like that, but all in all, can I recreate the tones I like on the Jupiter 8 that I've got in software on the Jupiter 8 on the System-8? Well, yes. So the software stuff I've got sounds like the Jupiter 8 because it's the Roland Cloud, so it is the System-8 anyway. But yeah, I was just super impressed once I started playing with the System-8 or the Roland Cloud next to the Jupiter 8. Yeah, it's there. It is. It's a really, really, really good emulation of the Jupiter 8. And so I hope that was of some use to somebody somewhere. If it was, please do subscribe, ring the bell and join me over on Patreon. If you want to pick up a System-8, do check out my affiliate links as well, because all that really does help. And thanks for staying to the very end, and I'll see you next time.